We all deal with conflict, whether it's with loved ones or people who are not so loved. Conflict is a fact of life, but doesn't mean that you need to flail your way through it. Hi, I'm Rich Burnett for Wondrium. In this episode of Perspectives, 3 experts look at what research shows about conflict, specifically between partners. They also provide some tools that anyone can use to make conflict more manageable and productive. We begin now with the first of these tools, simply taking a pause. Enjoy.
The stable partnership is, for many people, the most consistent source of both support and potential relationship stress. And the overall picture of that relationship has a profound impact on psychological and emotional health. A study of married couples from the University of Utah used CT scans to assess heart attack risk based on the presence of calcium deposits in the coronary arteries. Those calcium deposits narrow the arteries and increase heart attack risk. Interestingly, what mattered more than the presence of calcium deposits in predicting heart attack risk was the emotional tone of the marital relationship. All of the couples in the study had conflict. For women, it wasn't the amount of arguing or even the degree of the arguments that predicted health. It was whether there was any affection expressed in the relationship. A lack of warmth predicted heart attack risk. For the men, arguing didn't predict risk to their health, but power struggles for control did. The couples in the study were all relatively happy, generally healthy, and with long-standing marriages. The couples in the study had been married for an average of 36 years. But some of the couples in the study had conflict styles that were literally doing damage to their hearts. This is consistent with ongoing research by Dr. John Gottman. Dr. Gottman's research has consistently found that it's not the presence of conflict, but rather the absence of affection that predicts marital failure. Sometimes in a relationship, setting limits means realizing that we're caught in conflict and then agreeing together to stop. Research in Dr. Gottman's relationship lab found that when couples were arguing, taking a 20-minute break to stop talking and just read a magazine helped both members of the couple calm down. Their heart rates returned to normal. After the break, the tone of the discussion shifted, and the couples expressed higher levels of affection and humor. This is helpful because a more positive style of interaction is more conducive to resolving conflict and finding a mutually agreeable solution.
Gottman and his collaborators have become quite famous for being able to predict with greater than 90% accuracy which marriages will last and which will end in divorce. In their studies, Gottman's research team almost always collects a lot of data. They recruit couples to come into their research center and subject them to a wide range of tests. There are many questionnaires, video and audio recordings. Participants are often hooked up to devices that record their physiological responses to things: blood pressure, heart rate, muscle tension, a lot of things like that. A key part of the procedures that they use is to have the 2 members of the couple have a conversation in which they discuss something that's been a point of disagreement in their relationship. In essence, Gottman asks them to engage in a bit of a conflict, to have at least a little bit of an argument. A typical Gottman study involves collecting all of this data and then waiting, in some cases several years. After this time interval, some of the participants are still married. Others have divorced. The research team then analyzes their data to see if there was anything in those records that was consistently present for the still married couples that was not there for the now divorced couples. They also do the reverse. Turns out there's several things that are present for the divorced couples that's only rarely present for the still married couples. The important factors are a few key features of how they argue. Now, all couples argue. Okay, I've talked to a few people who've been married for decades who claim that they've never argued. I'm not sure if I believe them, actually. Regardless, no one's been following them around with a camera to confirm that data one way or the other. Almost all romantic partners argue, even romantic partners who are extremely happy in their relationship. A bad way to start an argument is with blame and harsh criticism. Imagine one partner starts by expressing something like, "The problem is that he doesn't want to spend time with the family. He just spends all of his time working." Several things will happen if the argument begins this way. First, the blood pressure, heart rate, and skin conductance levels of the recipient of the criticism will rise. His cognitive function will decline as his fight or flight system is activated. If this next thing happens, Gottman almost doesn't need to collect any more data. If the recipient of the criticism rolls his eyes, if he looks away and is basically dismissive of the criticism, then this discussion is already doomed, and the marriage may be also. In addition to the eye rolling, there are many other conflict-related behaviors that seem to lead to a downward spiral of negativity in a close relationship. The most important tip that Gottman's research has ever yielded is the following. If you want to maintain a lasting romantic relationship, learn to argue without being sarcastic, overly critical, or dismissive of your partner. Gottman and his colleagues have repeatedly found that marital arguments, discussions that involve a gentle startup lead to better outcomes. An argument with a gentle startup specifically avoids assigning blame. So instead of saying, "The problem is that he doesn't want to spend time with his family, he just spends all of his time working," Gottman's research suggests the discussion should begin with something like, "I feel unhappy that he doesn't spend more time with the family. I wish that we could find a way he could spend more time with us, even though I understand that might involve taking some time away from work." The same information is conveyed, the same desires, but without the blame part. Now, if the recipient still rolls the eyes or is generally dismissive, the problem is likely to still persist. Gottman would likely predict divorce, but not as confidently as he might have. More importantly, if arguments and discussions begin this way, Gottman has found that they tend to become more productive. The arguments become less upsetting. Group problem-solving activities is what they turn into, rather than a session primarily about venting frustrations. Now, I've described this as something that's the fault of the person who started the discussion, but it's clear from Gottman's work that this isn't the case. That's not how it works. Arguments don't exist in a vacuum. They don't exist in isolation. It's often the case that the aggressive start to an argument happens because the partner has been dismissive of the discussion in the past. There's a point to be made here that just because one argument starts aggressively doesn't mean that a marriage is doomed to divorce. Gottman's research group might only assess one argument, but it's the patterns that emerge from many arguments that are the inherent problem. The key tip here is to learn to argue better, to not be afraid of or defensive about arguments and disagreements in general. Being a better listener can lead to much better problem solving.
George Bernard Shaw tells us that the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place. It's tongue-in-cheek, but it's true. Miscommunication occurs regularly and drives a lot of conflict. There's been much written and studied about differences in how men and women communicate. We know that men spend about 2/3 of social conversations talking about themselves. Men are less likely to pick up on emotional cues. They're less likely to take turns or to give openings to someone else. Men report and women engage in rapport talk. Of course, much of this was summarized and made popular by John Gray, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, or by Deborah Tannen, You Just Don't Understand. But how do we go about assessing communication? Of course, we have self-report surveys, we have interviews, we might use reports from others, or we might even use observational studies. Another methodology uses trigger tape studies, where you watch a stimulus and then you have to generate a response. The interpersonal communication skills test assesses 5 categories of key skills: insightfulness, verbal expression, assertiveness, listening skills, and emotional management, a sort of roadmap to the essential competencies to having a healthy, emotionally intelligent conversation. Here's a few sample items from that survey, rated on a 1 to 5 scale. I managed to express my ideas clearly. I find it easy to see things from someone else's point of view. People don't get what I'm saying, or I have difficulty putting my thoughts into words. Now, we think that there are 5 basic requisites for discussions of emotions. So first, you have to be able to access your emotion. So you can't communicate your emotion if you're in denial, say, about it. You need the verbal communication skills to talk about your emotions. There needs to be a necessary level of self-esteem. I have a right to feel and to pursue my own goals. There needs to be a safe environment. And of course, you need to have a willing and able partner. How could we go about improving communication skills? And of course, we have 2 people. We have the sender or the talker, and we have the listener. We need to pick a good time for the conversation. You need to clearly express what you need and to make it clear. Having realistic expectations. Sticking with one issue at a time and being aware of your own and the other person's verbal and nonverbal signals. If you're the listener, we need to work on things such as eliminating distractions, improving nonverbal cues, improving verbal cues, and using empathic statements. Drawing from the couples emotion regulation research of Bob Levinson and others, we see that higher marital satisfaction is associated with less suppression of negative emotions.
When someone expresses anger at you, your brain is good at finding connections to word and actions that are related to anger. Things like yelling. It can be very hard to think of something to say or do that is related to nice, just because anger is so firmly activated in your brain. But if you do think of those words and actions, if you can respond to aggression with nice behaviors, it can often diffuse a negative interaction, often very rapidly. Researchers refer to this shift away from complementarity as non-complementarity. It's hard to do, but it can be very effective. I have, like most people, occasionally been in unpleasant arguments that grew quickly too angry or acerbic to be productive any longer. In these situations, we might be hurling insults or shouting at each other, but not actually listening to each other anymore. At this point, the argument was really of no value. Information was being conveyed, but no information was actually being received. No progress was being made toward actually resolving the disagreement. My human brain, like everyone else's, has a hard time getting out of the rut of this nasty complementarity behavior. Here's a trick that's worked for me. As you look at the person, think, "I love you," over and over again. Don't say it. Now just think the words. I love you, I love you, I love you. Even if you don't actually love the person, it can be downright impossible to think of more nasty things to say while you're doing this. As something positive does come to mind, say or do that positive thing. It might just end the conflict and get you both onto something more pleasant and productive. Family counselors often use this strategy when dealing with couples who are having relationship problems. If 2 people argue aggressively with one another a lot, over an extended period of time in particular, the aggression response will be stimulated even before that first word of a discussion is uttered. The brain gets into a defensive posture even before any actual attack. Once the 2 people in a relationship are stuck in this mode of processing, it can be very hard to find a way to live happily. If one, ideally both, but even just one of the members of this couple periodically expresses something positive to the other person, it can help to break this vicious cycle. It can be an uncomfortable thing to do, actually. We're talking here about delivering a compliment or a favor that is undeserved, seemingly unwarranted, and yet, as much as possible, completely genuine. Researchers like Myrna Friedlander and her colleagues have found that the technique is often helpful. The one potential problem that she's identified with this approach is that if the compliment is taken as not being genuine, perhaps taken as a sarcastic statement rather than a compliment, that it can lead back to more aggressive interactions. If you choose to try this technique, then you should start by finding something to do or say that you can be genuine about. Then be sure to follow through to make clear that you did actually mean what you said or did. I've urged you to experiment with being nice to someone who, doesn't necessarily deserve it. Someone who has been mean or aggressive with you. I'm not really urging that you do it for that person, however, but for yourself. If you can find a way to force yourself momentarily to be kind to someone, even if they don't deserve that kindness, you can shift how their brain processes additional incoming information. You can avoid, for yourself, the unpleasant experience of an angry confrontation. And ultimately, you can have a greater influence on that other person's behavior.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more about the topics in this episode, the full list of series that these clips came from is in the description below. You can watch them all on Wondrium. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel for new episodes of Perspectives, and you can watch previous ones here.